appreciate you putting your time meeting with us. We just kind of want to know where you in your life right now regarding your mental health.
It's really been like a focus of mine this past year, something I've tried to make a focus of mine, whereas in the past, it really hasn't been. So I'm trying to I have like a list of things I do regularly to try to take care of myself, like painting, reading, journaling, and I know we've talked about this before, but like the people that I'm around, I'm trying to be really selective about because I've also recently realized how big of an impact that has on your mental health.
You mentioned like in the past. So when did you kind of first begin your mental health journey and what did that look like for you?
It was really recent. It wasn't until I would say last January is when it was really a priority because it needed to be. That's when I first started therapy. And it was kind of like I really needed to because it was like the lowest point I've been in. Um, and through therapy, I realized that I had been struggling with depression my whole life, like ever since I hit puberty, pretty much. But because of the way that my family kind of goes about things, I kind of gaslit myself into being like, no, you don't have depression. Like you're at school every day, like you're seeing your friends and your family and like you're social. So like the internet says if you do all those things and you're not depressed. And so it took me a really long time to realize like it shows up in different ways for everybody. I've always functioned with it because in my brain, you have to,
Yeah.
Carmen said this before, but shit keeps going on. You still got to go to work, you got to go to school, you have things in your life that you have to deal with. So in my brain, it was never an option to just not do those things, but it was just extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And I think with the pandemic and everything and a couple other reasons, my depression really came to a major point last year to where I was still doing all those things, but it was so difficult, every single day. And the negative self-talk and just the way that I was living day to day, I was like, something has to change. I can't keep doing this. And so it is an active choice, I realize.
It has to be.
Yeah. Because it's easy to not. It's really easy to be like, I'm not doing all the steps, all the work, because sometimes that's hard. It's easy to be to just do the things that you want to do even when you know they're not good for you, instead of making the choice.
So I'm really proud of you for actively going, but also taking steps to do it. You don't have to do that. And I know that you mentioned your family and that you grew up gaslighting yourself.
It was definitely more taboo to talk about your emotions in that way. I think not with my mom, it was a little bit easier to be like, hey, I'm having a bad day or all this stuff. But there was, when I was 12, that was the first time in health class, they're talking about symptoms of depression. And I was like, shit, this is me. And I tried to talk to my mom about it. And at the time, some of the reasons why that were contributing to my mental health not being great were also tied into choices my parents made and things they had done. And so I think that was a really hard reality for them to face, and that they still really aren't in a place to do that. So I first tried to come to my mom and tell her I am depressed or I'm struggling with this. And it just immediately was a little bit of an argument because I said, she just wasn't ready to face the consequences of some of her actions, which I've never been a parent, but I could imagine you want the best for your kids and you don't want to realize that maybe you have had some negative impacts on them. Back now, there's no hard feelings about that. It definitely kind of put off me wanting to get help or seeking that out, because living with my parents, I knew that if I came to them and was like, I want to go to therapy, it would be more of a hassle than just in my brain, I'm like, deal with it.
Yeah. That's tough. That's tough. Scary to realize or to have a definition of what you're feeling in health class and just kind of look around and be like, y'all feel this way or just me? Anybody else? Anybody else? Yeah, I can get that. I relate. what did it look like for yourself trying to help you during that time?
Yeah, it was, I definitely did not know like coping mechanisms at that point. And
It
so,
wasn't talked about, to be honest.
and like in health class, they tell you like you're depressed if X, Y, and Z, but okay, what do you do from there? You know? And so I like would go through phases where like it was better sometimes for a couple months or it was worse sometimes. And I think I distracted myself a lot to where I was alone like as little as possible because that's when everything came up. And anytime those emotions came up, it was like, this is scary. I don't want to deal with this. So I threw myself into like friends every single day or like really threw myself into school and just didn't like anytime those feelings came up, I just like didn't focus on it. And I also like the friends that I had were amazing, but they were not the types of friends that you really like talk to about those kinds of things either. Looking back now is like very lonely because I felt like I'm the only one feeling this. Definitely engaged in behaviors that were not healthy, but I just didn't know that at the time. I was just
Right.
trying to do whatever I could to not feel that way.
And this is another hard part is when, okay, you're starting to work on yourself, label what you're going through, how you're feeling, and then seeing it around you. And
Mhm.
people who might not realize that they're going through similar situations too. So, do you think that now you've gained more intelligence in those areas? Do you notice patterns now that from how you were raised that have impacted you that you've had to kind of stop?
Especially just in the way because a lot of the way that I was dealing with it came from like how I saw my parents deal with things or my sister deal with things. And it was a lot of like trying to numb emotions or like you don't talk about it, you like sweep it under the rug and just hoping it'll go away. And so it's like consistently trying to break those patterns in my head. And especially communication has always been really, really difficult for me because there wasn't communication regarding those really important topics like mental health and emotions and feelings. So whenever those do come up, like that's something that I've had to work with my therapist about is like not even just dealing with it, but finding the words to like talk about it because I know exactly what I'm feeling sometimes, but I don't even know how to get out or explain to someone like how I'm feeling or what's going on in my brain. And so that's definitely been like a pattern I've had to break. And also just realizing that it's not taboo or like bad to talk about feelings that aren't just the good feelings. Like,
Yeah. Kind of going back to what Carmen said, after we've done a couple of these interviews, and even just from our personal experience, it's like whether or not you personally have mental health, you know somebody that does. You've been affected by it in some way. And now, today, that like these conversations are happening more and more, everybody's kind of like, wait, we've all been kind of feeling similarly in different ways, though.
like it's just amazing what a difference it makes feeling like, okay, if I'm having a shitty day, I can just tell my friends.
I'm glad that you're learning these skills and coping mechanisms. And you mentioned painting, and I've seen you paint. She's a terrific painter for everybody who's listening.
That's so cool. I love that.
Like journaling is also super helpful, but sometimes that is difficult, especially like with certain emotions or certain things going on in my head, like getting it out on paper. Sometimes that's really hard. And like
Yeah.
seeing it is like
Right.
really hard. And so it's been a really good tool in the sense that it's helped me. It's a distraction, but it also lets me feel what I'm feeling because another thing I've learned with like numbing your emotions and I've listened to like I've had professors that have talked about this and it's been so helpful. But like you said with the peaks and valleys or like lows, like you have to feel those bad feelings if you're going to feel the really really good ones and numbing the bad emotions, you're going to also numb the really good ones. And so you need that balance of like I've had to learn to sit with those kind of painful feelings, not letting them take over, but just letting myself experience them because it's necessary. And so, like
Mhm.
with painting, I can kind of sit with them and like allow myself to feel them, but I'm also like engaging in something that lets me get them out. And like my old roommate could tell you, like if she came home and I'm like on the floor painting with my headphones in, she doesn't talk to me because she's
It's true.
Were there some coping mechanisms that maybe didn't work or some numbing situations that you kind of were like, wait, this isn't helping?
surrounding yourself with people like is helpful, but also I realized there's certain people that are helpful and certain people that just like drain your energy.
Yeah.
Not to say that they're not always like good friends, but there's just certain people that you're like more comfortable with, or like I was saying earlier, you feel kind of like safer being in those not okay headspaces than others. um and also I've had to pay closer attention to like the way that I'm drinking, because that, especially in college, it was like, okay, you're having a shitty day, it's a Friday night, all your friends are going out, I'm just gonna get fucked up and like that
Right.
makes me feel better. And
Yeah.
a lot of times it didn't. Like, yeah. And so that's something I've had to like kind of pay attention to as well.
What drained you?
I think about like over time our interactions, how they look, and like, okay, I'm showing up for this person a lot, but how many times have I felt comfortable going to them? Or, when we're not out drinking after work, when are we hanging out? Is it only when we're out drinking, or
Right.
are they asking me to go on a walk or like go see a movie or something? And it's kind of helped me limit where and who I'm spending my time with, because like sure, those friends that you go out with are like fun and everything, but I also know that if I'm having a bad day, they're not someone that I feel necessarily comfortable opening up to, because it's not a rewarding experience, I guess. And also just like how our conversations look, like people who are more negative most of the time, like that's gonna like drain you really quickly, especially if you're working hard to be in a positive mindset. Like when they're constantly complaining or something's always wrong and that's all that the conversation is focused on, it's like, okay, I don't want to put my energy into that necessarily.
Right. You kind of start to look at like your posse, your crew, and it's like, okay, I want to give the energy that I'm giving, I hope to receive.
I feel like I'm there for a lot of my friends, but there are times like if I open up to someone or I go to someone and the way they respond like determines if I ever go to them about something again. And it's like in my brain I'm like, period, I'm not going to open up to you again, because like that, it's like already hard enough, I feel like, to open up to people, and when they're not receptive of it, it's like, okay, noted.
It sucks
It's
when you
tough.
realize it. It sucks when you realize that something's not being reciprocated. But you can have standards when it comes to friends and your peers and who you're going to put yourself around. So I'm not expecting anything out of you.
And you've honestly been a big help with that as well. But and that just goes back to like, I don't know, surrounding yourself with the people who help you grow in the ways that are like conducive to the ways you want to grow. And like,
Yeah. Like, why put my energy that I work hard on into something that's not going to give me, it's only giving me negative energy?
exactly. And like as I've gotten older, I've realized with like family is obviously like a great support system, but it's also family, and like families aren't perfect. And I've had like my own issues with my family. And so as I've gotten older, my friends are really like, that's like my core like support, is like the people that I'm friends with. It takes a lot to get a good support group. And like, that's almost like your like chosen family, you know?
It is. I completely get what you're saying.
Mhm.
So, how has kind of going back to therapy, how
Mhm.
has therapy helped you kind of navigate through all this?
The main reason how I realized that I don't want to say issues, but like I said earlier, I had just been kind of like telling myself, like, people have it worse. Like, you're getting out of bed every day. Like, you're like, people have gone through worse shit and made it out the other end. So, like, why are you complaining? And especially like my family provided for me very well. And so I'm like, I had a house, I had clothes on my back, I had food on the table. Like, I shouldn't feel this way. And so therapy, like, firstly was so helpful, and being like, everything's valid. And like, as corny as that sounds, like having your emotions validated is so helpful. And I feel like honestly, like a huge first step in dealing with those emotions, and also just helping me realize certain things in my life, that ways I was being mistreated, or like Carmen was talking about, like standards not being met that I didn't really realize and I was just kind of putting up with. Also then helping identify those coping mechanisms in like ways that I can feel better, and things I can do outside of therapy to consistently work at it. Like we said earlier, like it's all about the homework. Like
It
I can
really is. And it's tough to do the homework.
another thing about therapy that I like, a misconception I had before I went into it, is I was like, okay, like week one, I'm gonna feel better, or like I'm automatically gonna feel comfortable with this person because they're labeled as a therapist. And that was not the case. So like it was probably 6 months before I was fully like open, honest, like, okay, here's really everything I'm feeling and thinking. And I'm gonna be honest, when like this week I didn't journal or go on a walk or like help myself really.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I was honest is when like I feel like it really started working. But I just kind of assumed like I would feel comfortable with this stranger right off the bat, and like I didn't. It was like I was like picking and choosing like what I want to tell my therapist, and then like, oh, like maybe she doesn't need to know about that. And then it was like, no, like I need to tell her these things, I can't. I was like almost embarrassed. And we finally had a conversation where she's like, I'm not judging you. Like, I'm literally just here to help.
Especially when you're in therapy. That means you have to be honest with yourself if you're going to tell somebody else. And that ain't fun either. Once I say it, I can't go back. So
you have to be ready to like face those things and help yourself, because if you're not, like, you can't really do it half-ass. You
Right.
can't. And I think that's what I was trying to do in the beginning. Part of the experience was realizing that just because I'm like getting help and like I'm doing better, like there's still going to be like days or weeks that are not so good, because like I'm on medication as well, but it is like it's a chronic disease.
Yeah.
Like you can't just like squash it and then it's like never coming up again. Healing isn't linear. You're still gonna deal with it, but you're just better equipped to deal with it, and it can help it not like take over your life.
doesn't mean it goes away. You are just more equipped. You're more aware of what you can control out of it and what you can't. So
It's cool to see too, even the growth within yourself. Like, wait a minute, I kind of know I can paint. I know painting might help me feel better. Or like, I know a walk might help me feel better. Or let me give my friend who I can rely on a quick chat, a quick call. It's good to kind of be like, even though I'm not feeling great, I'm progressing. There's there's some growth that I can even see within myself and how I react to these situations.
I know how I handled things in the past and how I felt in the past. And even just like recently, when like shitty things in life coming up, I'm able to look back and I'm like, okay, like that sucks, but I'm handling it like better than I have in the past. And it shows, and I can like feel that. And it's really like tender. A piece of advice that I've heard from multiple people that's really helped is like, whenever you're in those valleys, because they will come, just knowing that there's going to be a peak again. And like, it's not forever. Like, situations and things are very temporary. And just because you feel like that might last forever, or you can't like, see the light at the end of the tunnel, doesn't mean it's not coming. And you also like never know what life has in store for you, because it has some amazing things planned for you. And you have to let yourself be sad sometimes in order to let yourself feel like super, super happy and enjoy those really good moments.